The Troika summit as head of and presiding over the African Union, President Sisi actually met with some African leaders discussing the situation in Sudan and Libya. And joining us here tonight in the studio to shed more light on this issue is Dr. Cherif Amir, the Professor of Geopolitical Affairs at the University of Paris. Dr. Amir, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we start our discussion, let's check out this report regarding the referendum on the constitutional amendments, and we'll be right back.
The National Elections Authority announced the results of the constitutional amendments after voting ended on Monday evening. About 61 million Egyptians were eligible to vote in the referendum that ended on April the 22nd. Polling stations nationwide closed on Monday, with embassies and consulates abroad closing on Sunday after 3 days of voting through 140 polling stations in 124 countries. The NEA spokesperson, Councillor Mahmoud al-Sharif, said the authority immediately addressed all electoral issues and violations. The amendments extend the presidential term to 6 years and gives the current president the right to stand for another 6-year term. The referendum also proposes other changes to the 5-year-old constitution, including creating a second parliamentary chamber, which comprises of 180 members, and a quota at least 25% of lawmakers are women. The amendments also include an establishment of a chamber of 180 members, in which 1/3 of the members are appointed by the president, according to Articles 248, 250 and 253. Other amendments reduce the number of deputies in the assembly. These amendments aim to realize Egyptians' aspirations to live in dignity and under the rule of law.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now the results of the referendum on the constitutional amendments. Out of the 61 million who are eligible to vote, about 44.33% actually cast their ballots. About 88% of the valid votes voted yes for the constitutional referendum. Now, all these numbers are inside and outside of Egypt. Dr. Amir, first of all, how would you evaluate the process of the referendum on the constitutional amendments, and what do you think of the results?
Well, first of all, the people said their word. Since 2014, the Egyptians have taken bold steps towards their democratic and political life. Although there were many handicaps from the external media outside of Egypt and social media spreading rumors and trying to dissuade the people from going to the ballots. I think that the turnout is relatively good. We have seen people who said no. They expressed it in total freedom and all transparency. Even the reports in the public media, some people said that they will vote no. This is democracy. And I think that the fact that it didn't end at the deputies and it went further as a referendum to the people, this is a very concrete step towards the democratic life of Egyptian politics. We didn't see it before. This time I have seen two amazing things. First of all, that the media coverage, you here in the media, as a public media, it was totally transparent. No one was telling anyone how to vote. It was only urging people to take part in this process, and that's it. And this is very, well, it's a very good sign, because the state could have used it as a propaganda, and it didn't. So this first step. The second step is that now we have, for the first time, the percentage of people saying no. So there is no democratic signs more than that. People went to the ballots freely. Those who said we will say yes said it freely without any pressure, and those who wanted to say no said it no freely, inside and outside Egypt. We all know that I, as a specialist of the geopolitics of the Middle East, I'm telling you that we are heading towards a very narrow path in this region. We are heading towards a very difficult period in the history of the Middle East in the coming months. So I think that that the leadership of Egypt wanted to make things clear with the people. This was a very wise act to do it now. People have to make their choices and choose who will lead Egypt, because I repeat, the coming period will be really difficult. We have seen that starting to the flares in Libya, in Sudan, even North Africa, in Algeria, and elsewhere around us, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So we have to have stability, and we have to have strong leadership. And I think that it was said today.
Yes. Well, Dr. Amir, we're going to be talking about this difficult period coming ahead, as you've mentioned. Now, first of all, the majority of the people voting on the referendum, they said yes and approving the constitutional amendments. Now, what does that mean? Now, what would be different for those who don't know? The new amendments compared to the 2014 constitution. What does passing these amendments mean?
Well, in 2014, the people have witnessed the role of the armed forces, and the armed forces didn't take the side of the people until the people asked for it, and they did it in the revolution of June 30th, 2013. So this was a new covenant between the people of Egypt and their military institution. Today, in these amendments, this military institution, the same, is asking the permission to be a guarantor of not only the security of Egypt, but the civil liberty of the state of Egypt. And it's and this is in relation with which we will see in the events to come in the Middle East. So I think this is the first step, that there is a guarantor, a protector. And this is in every country. We have seen in Turkey, it was the same thing. The army is guaranteeing the liberty and the secular character of the state. And everywhere there is an institution guaranteeing this. It strengthens also the judiciary powers, and it gives the judges more credibility and more authority in dealing with these in every aspect of the law. Concerning the amendment of the presidency, well, look, we have seen elsewhere in the Middle East what took place in Egypt is like the snap elections. Benjamin Netanyahu did it in Israel, because the whole region is going towards a narrow path. As I said, he made the snap elections in Israel, and the Likud went very quickly. And then when General Gantz and Gabi Ashkenazi, the former chief of staff of the Israel's armed forces, tried to form the blue and white party, they didn't have enough time, and Benjamin Netanyahu made his score. This was a snap election, and he secured more 6 years to come. Erdogan in Turkey, he had local elections because he wanted to strengthen the base of his popularity. Well, he actually lost in major cities, but he tried to ensure it. So what we have done is in Egypt is a third way. It's not the snap election, it's a referendum. It's more bold to ask the people whether they want to see this process to continue or not. It's a referendum about the president himself, also about the amendments. And I think that the people said it in total transparency. We had no way to make it other way than transparency, because we had all the media outside Egypt focused on what's going on. They were waiting for the tiniest mistake, unfortunately. And those also some Egyptians outside Egypt who try to portray it as a dictatorship, something else. Well, the huge turnout, we have seen it. And we have seen, I repeat, people who said no. So the amendment on the presidency, I think it's about enough time that a leader needs, especially in a country like in Egypt, a country like Egypt in the Middle East. It's not easy. And I think myself, I think 4 years, whether it's President Sisi or someone else, 4 years has to be extended because, as you see, everything is very volatile in this region. It could go very slowly, and in a twinkle of the eye, you will have total different scenario in front of you. So you need stability. You need someone who reads very well the calculations. Someone like President Sisi, who's a former man of intelligence services. We need this kind of leadership right now. And things will go beyond 4 years. That's why we need to focus on who will lead Egypt in the coming years.
Yes. Dr. Amir, what about the quotas for the laborers, the farmers, the people with special needs, the quotas and their representation in the parliament? Does that change from the 2014 constitution?
Of course it has changed, and it is said that very clearly now that these people have to have their places with the quotas inside the Egyptian parliament. And let's not forget also the young people were mentioned, because many young people, unfortunately, were hesitating to take part in this process. Well, once they read about the amendments, they said, why not? Let's take part and cast our votes. So I think that the quotas are very, very clear. Now everything will be under the law. If anyone will feel that his quota is being hindered or not respected, he can go to the court now, to the constitutional court, and ask for his rights, as it happens everywhere in the world, in the Western world, and in every democracy.
Yes. Dr. Amir, you mentioned that we are slowly getting into a difficult period of time for North Africa and the Middle East in general. Now, everybody expected that the rough times would have been the past few years, starting with the Arab uprisings and everything. Why is the coming period more difficult than the previous period?
Because we are seeing now a new map in the Middle East. The United States is drawing this map very quickly. It started with Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and then the Golan Heights. And by the way, today, Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, designated the first settlement in the Golan Heights in the name of Trump as a thank you. And we are heading now, as I said before many times, the more the Syrian conflict is getting closed and finished, the more we will see the flares elsewhere. We have seen the Iranians, they have changed the commander-in-chief of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, preparing themselves for confrontation with the United States forces in the Middle East. The US State Department, Mark Pompeo declared that the Revolutionary Guard is a terrorist movement. I think that now they are trying also to find a solution for the two-state solution in Israel. The Kingdom of Jordan is not really in a good position now, so there is a major shake-up. And for Egypt, regimes are changing in Sudan and in the West. We have seen now that Field Marshal Khalifa Haftar is having many gains, but still we are seeing that many forces are trying to vanquish the Libyan army. That means that Egypt would be threatened. So it's changing everywhere. We don't know where Algeria is going. It's an Arab country. It's the second largest after Egypt in the Arab world. 2 days ago, on Sunday, some demonstrations started in Rabat, in Morocco. So it's very, very critical. And I think that Israel also is trying to ensure its security by spreading territorially, and Hezbollah present in Lebanon and present in Syria is being the spearhead of Iran now. And I think that the confrontation would be very, very near, maybe in the summer, because many things should be decided. And I think that we will have the collusion of Russia, the United States, Israel and Iran, and of course Egypt is a major country. We ensure our stability, and we also ensure the stability of the Arab world. And we have dual positions. We are guarantor and mediators of peace, and also the strongest army in this region.
Yes. Well, let's take it bit by bit now. First off, you've mentioned that Iran is prepping itself for a confrontation with the US. Now, such a confrontation, will the Middle East or the North African region be the battleground for such a confrontation, a potential and possible confrontation?
Look, the Iranians now are concentrated about the Strait of Hormuz because of the oil embargo, because they are trying to find a solution. They don't want to see themselves suffocating economically. Some friendly regime, let's say it, the al-Bashir regime in Sudan was friendly with the Iranians, and sometimes with the Turks, and sometimes with the Saudis. So this is a major asset who was lost also for them. We all know that the Iranians are getting more and more closer to the Golan Heights, and the battlefield is Syria, it's not their country. The battlefield in Lebanon is also pseudo country for them by the Hezbollah. So the Iranians are engaging the war outside of their territories. This is their strategy. And they're trying to work like that since the beginning of the Islamic Revolution, to make the battlefield outside, so they will be always in protection. So I think that the moment that some countries like Saudi Arabia or Israel or the United States would like to find an end to this conflict, especially that the Saudis didn't find a real solution, concrete solution for the Yemeni conflict, I think that at this time, the confrontation could take place in other countries like Lebanon, for example, or in Syria. Well, look, every day and then we hear about the Israeli fighter jets bombing sites in Syria. Well, the war is already engaged in another country between Iran and Israel. So at a certain time, this war could start at any time, but the Iranians always gamble by taking hostages other countries.
Yes.
And I think that the Russians will calculate President Vladimir Putin, who is a very smart leader and strong leader. He knows very well how to calculate the interests of Russia before anyone else.
Well, Dr. Amir, you've also mentioned these sort of turbulences that are taking place in Algeria and quite recently Morocco as well. How are these turbulences going to affect the situation in the Middle East and North Africa?
Well, as I said, the Algerian army is the second largest army after Egypt's army. Algeria also is very known for the oil production. So this is a fact. The third point is the Islamic groups there. It's still very fragile, Algeria. It didn't have enough time to get out of just 20 years, and it's nothing in history, to get out of the civil war with Islamic groups. And there is the minority problems, like, for example, the Berbers, the Amazigh. So it's very, very complicated. A country like that, it could explode in a moment. And it's in the Mediterranean. And it has plenty of radical groups inside. I don't want to call them terrorists. So I think that we are witnessing a very critical operation inside Algeria, because the people, the young people, don't want to see any figures from the ancient regime, and the people who are at Bouteflika's surroundings, they don't want to leave easily. So they're trying to sacrifice some businessmen by putting them in prisons now, but things won't come like that. There is so many actions that the people need to see. And if they won't see it now, it will be very dangerous. Concerning Morocco, which is a very difficult also problem, political problems with Algeria. It was Sunday, last Sunday, the people of the Harak, which is like the Arab Spring, they went to the streets asking the liberation of 42 activists who were arrested maybe, maybe in August or July, last July. And why they chose this moment, we don't know. But they went to the streets, they defied the authorities there, and it won't be the last. They will go again. And these are being the emblems of the future of Morocco. So this, of course, will destabilize, first of all, the Mediterranean, which means Algeria is France, of course, and it will destabilize also the whole region, because you have Tunisia, which is very fragile, and you have Libya with all this chaos, and we don't know who will interfere in Algeria. And the army is trying to calm the situation. Sometimes it's assuring the people that it will respond, and sometimes they're telling them, well, we will use iron fist.
Yes. Well, taking that back to the constitutional amendments, now, how are these constitutional amendments helping Egypt in actually securing a safe and stable passage through this upcoming period with all these difficulties taking place in the region?
Leadership. I remember when there were the attacks of 9/11, and it was at that time George W. Bush, the president, and there was severe criticism, and it was then the elections of his first term against John Kerry. And I remember many Americans, I was at France at that time, said to me, we never change a president during war. You never change a commander during the war. And I think that the French have the same mentality. The British did the same thing with Winston Churchill when it was in the end of the war, he left. And Charles de Gaulle, with a referendum on the constitution, he left in 1968. They were the liberators and the commanders in war, but they had to leave. But now, you don't change a commander during a commander-in-chief of the armed forces and of a country who is trying to build itself. We have seen what took place in 2011. And everyone who says conspiracy, well, things were that clear, it's written on the wall, that Qatar, Turkey, other countries were trying to not destabilize Egypt, but to destroy Egypt. And I think now that the choice is very clear. We have a leadership who knows very well what's taking place. That's why we're working against the clock very speedily in the reconstruction of Egypt, because there will be a time then there will have to be mobilized to defend our country. Look what's taking place in Libya. That means that these same groups are still well and alive and trying to fight the Libyan army, and God knows what they're trying to do afterwards. Why do we want to approach our borders by any means? I should ask these focusing borders. They're not in or to need their critical in Sudan. I salute and had a new leadership headed by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan.
Yes. Well, because we will be talking about Libya and Sudan more in details, but before we go to that part now, you've mentioned the situation taking place in Algeria and Morocco. And we understand that there are many other parties, many other players such as the US, maybe Iran and Israel and even Russia. But do you see other European countries paying special interest in these two countries, such as France, for instance?
Of course, France, well, I always call it like that, but with a huge difference. The relation between France and Algeria is like the relation between Egypt and Sudan. It was historical. It was a part of this country. The people of Algeria are always longing to go to France, and France is trying always to have good relation, which is very difficult at some times due to the Algerian war, La Guerre d'Algérie. It was very, very difficult stories said at that time about France, and there is much hatred and much violence that was expressed during this war. I think that the French trying not to meddle in Algeria because they have a very important community of Algerians inside their country, and they are really very calm now during the Yellow Vest demonstrations. So they do not wish to push things further by persuading these people to go and join the Yellow Vests against them. At the beginning, they said they respect Bouteflika's decisions, and then once, because the Yellow Vests go to the streets every Saturday, they went to the streets. The Algerians went to the streets with them, and it was the alarm. And many politicians said, "Don't fall into this mistake, because you will push all the Algerians against you, and it will be in the suburbs. It will be hell." So that's why they kept a distance. They're watching, and they cannot really express any solidarity towards the Algerians, the Algerian oligarchy, or even the people in the army.
Yes, well, definitely these are certain files that we'll be following up later on with all the developments taking place there. But other turmoils, other developments, political developments are taking place in the region, mainly in Sudan and Libya. And President Sisi, as head of the African Union, also met with African leaders, the leaders of Rwanda, South Africa and Congo, discussing these two specific files, the situation in Sudan and the situation in Libya. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
Hosted on Tuesday consultation summits to discuss the ongoing Sudanese and Libyan crises under an African Union umbrella. President Abdel Fattah Sisi, who's also this year's chairman of the AU, hosted a meeting attended by the regional partners in Sudan with the participation of the Chadian President Idris Deby, Rwanda's head of state Paul Kagame, Congo's Denis Sassou Nguesso, Somalia's Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed, and South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa, as well as Djibouti's leader Ismail Omar Guelleh. Also participating was the chief of the AU Commission, the Ethiopian Deputy Prime Minister, South Sudanese Advisor for Security Affairs, as well as officials from Uganda and Nigeria. President Abdel Fattah Sisi expressed on Tuesday Egypt's full support for the Sudanese people's choices and their free will in forming the future of their country. The president was addressing a consultation meeting on the situation in Sudan. In his speech, he thanked the African leaders participating in the meeting for their quick response to the invitation for the emergency meeting. He said this reflects keenness on united African action and an activation of the principle of finding African solutions to African crises. The president said that as neighbors to Sudan and regional partners, they will continue to support the Sudanese people's endeavors to overcome this critical phase. The summit also discussed the developing conditions in Sudan and boosting joint work and consultations over the best methods to deal with the developments in the country to continue the support of stability and peace. For Sudan, the objective of the summit was to discuss the most appropriate ways to address the evolution of the situation. Also on Tuesday, President Sisi hosted another meeting of the AU's Troika Summit and chairmanship of the Libya Committee in the African body to discuss the latest developments in Libya and means to contain the current situation and revive the political process. The meetings come as both Libya and Sudan are continuing to witness political and security flare-ups. In Libya, clashes have been erupting in Tripoli between Libya's internationally recognized government and Khalifa Haftar's Libyan National Army. Sudan, on the other hand, has seen witnessing a clash between the Sudanese transitional military and protesters.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and now we're joined over the phone by Dr. Hassan Wagih, the Professor of Linguistic Negotiations at Cairo University. Dr. Wagih, can you hear us, sir?
Yes, I can hear you.
Dr. Wagih, now, President Sisi held two emergency summits with African leaders today, Rwanda, Congo, and South Africa, really talking and discussing the two neighboring countries to Egypt, the situation in Libya on the western side of Egypt, and the situation in Sudan, south of the Egyptian borders. Now, how would you rate the importance and the timely importance of such summits held by President Sisi?
Yes, this is very needed consultative summit. Sudan is a brotherly country and a neighboring country, an important country, strategic country, and there is an Egyptian special interest in helping our brothers in Sudan. So I think the ties between the Egyptian people and the Sudanese people are so strong thousands of years ago and now and in the future. So I think that was an Egyptian move. In addition, it is under the banner and it is subsumed under the title of the African Union. The president is the president of the African Union for this round, and it is he saw that it is his duty to make this consultative summit to help out the Sudanese to come up with a solution and to help them taking their cognitive map, road map to the destination the Sudanese people want to reach.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Wagih, now, what about the choice of the leaders of other African nations? Now, President Sisi met with the leaders of Congo, Rwanda, and South Africa. How influential can these leaders and their countries be in the situation in Sudan and Libya?
Actually, they are active members in the African Union, and also the choice included other countries other than the ones you mentioned, Ethiopia and other countries. Mm-hmm. The point is not the choice of the countries. The point is that it is consultative summit, so it could be not with all the members, but it seeks the problems the Sudanese are suffering from, trying to help them there is a severe economic situation there. There are so many things to be talked about, especially if you know that the African country, the African unity, through the Council for Peace and Security, gave the Sudanese military council almost 15 days to transmit or to transform into a civilian government, or else they will take measures against it. I think, and this is my own opinion, of course, I think that this consultative summit wants to give a face for the situation, because You know, in Sudan you have 150 parties. And if they wanted to come to a consensus, this needs much more time than the 15 days, for instance. This is why President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has already, within this context, proposed the importance of establishing modalities for managing crises in the African continent, for Sudan, for Libya, for Somalia, for any protracted crises or any emerging crises. So I think the consultative meeting is intended to handle such points of view as I can see them.
Yes. Dr. Hassan Wagih, the Professor of Linguistic Negotiations at Cairo University, thank you very much for joining us. Now, Dr. Amir, first of all, let's focus on the situation in Sudan. Now, the situation there is quite similar to situations we've seen in many countries, including Egypt as well, during the Arab uprisings. How does this compare to the other Arab uprisings, and what can we learn through our own experiences and other Arab countries' experiences going through that process that Sudan can benefit from?
Well, first of all, the situation in Sudan is much more critical than Egypt's situation, because when you read, for example, the statements of the military council there, you discover very strange things, that there are some parts of Sudan under the control of militias. We didn't have this in Egypt, and thank God we didn't have it even after the 2011 revolution. This is very dangerous. And the council asked these groups to cease fire during this period of transition, and they respected it. That's very strange. So that's it's very complicated situation. You have the problem of Darfur. It's not really solved. There was another problem also, is that when the Minister of Defense who sacked al-Bashir, who's called Ben Auf, he himself is on the list of war criminals for the International Tribunal. So this was very critical. That's why they had to find a solution with this man. And he understood that he will bring many problems to the already existing problem, as he himself as a person. He's someone who's accused of war crimes inside his country, and then he had to find a reconciliation with the people. So the people, of course, refused him. And then he has a problem with the outside world. So that's why he had to leave. And then we had now Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, which is a young leader in the military. He started the negotiations with the people, but the problem is that he was unknown for the outside world and unknown for the African Union. That's why the African Union started saying, well, this is not a democratic path. This is an overturning of the will of the people. The military council have 15 days to leave. And then it was Egypt's role that we, as president of the African Union, we made our contacts. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi starting contacting the head of the Peace and Security Council in the African Union. And then the head of this council went to Sudan, to Khartoum, and met with the head of the military council. And they said, well, okay, let's forget now about the 15 days. We have seen that it's very complicated indeed, and that you are trying to start negotiations with the civil activists there. So Egypt saved the situation. When we see today how the process is going in Sudan, of course it will affect Egypt's geopolitical calculations, because it's a change of not only the head of the state. It will change all the political system. There will be other parties, civil parties. Who knows who is with or against Egypt? Who is financed from or from outside forces. We know that al-Bashir had relations with Turkey, with Iran, with Saudi Arabia, with Qatar. We have seen very good signs. For example, the head of the foreign affairs in Sudan was sacked because, without taking the permission of the military council, he asked a delegation of Qatar to come and visit. So he was sacked because this, of course, the military council there wants to have good excellent relations with Egypt. They cannot afford of losing an ally like Egypt. So I think that, fortunately, the decisions that Egypt have made all the past years gave us now the possibility to give the advice, the fact that we are the president of the African Union, and the fact that the character of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is very charismatic and very wise in dealing with these problems, saved the situation for the Sudanese. I appreciate that we have taken the excellent step from the beginning by saying we respect the will of the Sudanese people. They didn't, al-Bashir didn't do the same thing when we had the revolution of June 30th in 2013. We have seen, for example, Erdogan, who said he condemned this decision of sacking al-Bashir, and he said it's a coup. Now he's losing the alliance that he had in the island of Sawakin and his forces who were to be stationed there. Apparently they will leave. So the money were spent, they're gone now, because all the money of al-Bashir is being now under the control of the new authorities. So this is the main point, that Sudan, of course, it's a major country. Egypt detains also another important key, which is a life and death key for Khartoum, which is South Sudan. We have excellent relations with the leadership in South Sudan. So we have maintained the peace between both of them, and we have maintained the relations with the military council. And I think that I'm very optimistic and that General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan could be a very wise leader to guide. He's young, and the people in the streets are young. So I think that the harmony will take place.
So how does Egypt, as head of the African Union, solve a situation like that of Sudan without getting into any sort of confrontations with strong allies to al-Bashir, as you've mentioned, maybe Turkey and Qatar as well?
Look at today's meeting and the countries who came. There is a key word for all the countries who are invited. It's the Nile. It's very
Will that situation affect Egypt's share of the Nile water, the file?
The problem with these countries, when you have a southern country which is a strategic asset for you, like Sudan in the south, and the Nile goes through it, the tiniest problem would affect you. It's like the electricity. You will have the tiniest problem, it could have a power cut off. We don't wish to see any problems in Sudan. If the problems would take place there, sooner or later we'll pay the price. And it's not in our interest. So we had to explain to all these countries that the new leadership in Sudan is not like the first one, because well, as we say in the Egyptian proverb, that the birds got along. Well, Sudan and Turkey, both leaders used to use blackmail. And al-Bashir used to blackmail Egypt and used to blackmail the Ethiopians. And he used to blackmail everyone for his own interest. So I think things will be very different now. This is what President Sisi had to explain today to the leaders of these countries, who are major countries on the Nile. And of course other countries like Chad also are affected because because al-Bashir financed militia groups against the President Idriss Déby of Chad. So I think that President Sisi today, he was advocating the cause of the people of Sudan. This is his role as President of the African Union. He explained what took place. It was very honest discussions. I'm very optimistic because these leaders have personal contacts with President Sisi and they trust him. And the word trust is very valuable in these kind of crises, because they didn't trust al-Bashir, and nothing will give him any guarantee that the next one will, who is unknown, which is General Abdurrahman al-Burhan, will be someone trustworthy.
Yes.
They could act according to their interests. So he gave them today the new statement about Sudan.
Yes. Dr. Amir, what about the situation in Libya? Now, the situation in Libya, we understand the internationally recognized government, the armed forces, and General Khalifa Haftar, and we also understand that there are other groups involved as well. You've mentioned earlier that they really want to come closer to Egypt's western borders. Now, we've seen the presidency and the Egyptian government do a lot of efforts to solve the situation in Libya. How can we actually find a quick and concrete practical solutions to solve the Libyan situation?
First of all, as we say here in Egypt officially, we don't interfere in other countries' affairs, because they're trying to make all the illusions that there are special air force crossing the border, putting the other parts of the Libyan, and they're trying to make these, especially Al Jazeera and other media hostile to Egypt, that this is Egypt's interference. They have no proof. There is no proof for that. So this is point number one. Point number two, yes, they're giving advice to others there. They have an army who is fighting to defend terrorist groups. These are this is a Libyan army with Libyan generals, with Libyan soldiers, fighting some groups who are not even Libyans. They come from the outside and finance. We all know that recently there were Qatari and Turkish airplanes, cargo airplanes, trying to deliver arms to them. So I think we as Egypt, we endorse, of course, the Libyan people. We don't endorse mercenaries sent from other countries. So what we are doing is according to the international law. The second point, as I said it many times before, Field Marshal Khalifa Haftar, and I know it personally when I was in France also, that he was persona non grata, someone who was undesirable for the French and for the Europeans. They didn't wish even to hear his name, because he was a general under Gaddafi, and then he had a problem with the French in Chad and all that, but he became a dissident for Gaddafi afterwards. They didn't wish to see him as representative. It was Egypt's very hard task of diplomacy to convince the people that this was a new chapter, a critical one, and you have to deal with a representative of the Libyan people. And General Khalifa Haftar is the representative, and now he's being not only received in Paris, but he has the endorsement of major European countries. We have seen German Chancellor Angela Merkel contacted President Sisi, because she knows that about the Libyan conflict. She knows that he has the wise analysis and what he predicted from the beginning, that if we would not find a solution, as you asked, you have found a solution quickly, this part of the southern Mediterranean, I put it geographically like that, means southern Europe, would be the gates of hell for Europe. They tasted it with the refugees and the terrorist groups, and it was now they're saying that it was a critical mistake. I'm not talking about Gaddafi, but I'm talking about the delivery of arms to unknown groups in Libya. So, of course, we had to act, and we are defending the Libyan people.
Well, Dr. Amir, how hard would it prove to be for diplomacy to find a solution if the internationally recognized government and the armed forces and General Khalifa Haftar are still divided and in an ongoing conflict? How far can diplomacy solve an issue with such a division?
I think it's the hands of Fouad al-Sarraj, which of the international recognized government, to ask these militias to leave Libya. Could he make the statement? I think that the ball is in his camp. He has to act and ask these groups to leave Libya, and he has to sit down with General Khalifa Haftar, and then let the Libyan army take control like any other army in the world on its own territory. Mm-hmm. Why he's sticking to these principles of getting some groups into his territories and fighting against a Libyan army? What's the interest of fighting your own army? You have to work for the stability of your own country. Why he is trying to witness or trying to have always the credits from the international community and not from major countries like Egypt? Mm-hmm. The equation is very difficult for him. Yes. So I think that he has to take the decision, but I'm very optimistic also for this work, a tremendous work yes. of Marshal Khalifa Haftar.
Yes. Well, definitely, ladies and gentlemen, there's still a lot of work and a lot of work for the diplomacy to solve such critical files as the Libyan one and the Sudanese one. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition to discuss it of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank our very distinguished guest, Dr. Cherif Amir, the Professor of Geopolitical Affairs at the University of Paris. Dr. Amir, always a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.
It's 10 p.m. here in Cairo. Time for the hour's top stories. The National Election Authority announced on Tuesday the results of the referendum on constitutional amendment